I'm excited to be here this morning. Man, I don't get that often to come and teach, but when Mike gives me that opportunity, because I know I have another vocation, I'm delivering your mail during the day and not getting there on time. So, I think about some of the vacations that my wife and I have taken over the years when our kids were smaller. And I bet each of us in this room can write a story about the vacations you had with kids or family, and maybe some vacations that didn't go well, and you can laugh about it later, or maybe something that happened there that you said, you know what, I'll never forget that. We're at Lake Nacimiento, and we were camping along this trailer, and we'd go to the lake during the day, and then we'd come back, we had this fire pit, and all of our girls were toasting the marshmallows around it. And most of them were elementary school age, and Terry and I we're all talking, laughing, and right at that moment, it got kind of quiet, and all you hear is some bushes crackling, like something is stepping on it. My oldest would look at me and he says, Dad, what was that? I'm like, I'm not sure. And I'm already laughing because I'm like, this is not going to go well. So you hear it, but you hear the crackling getting closer and closer to our family. And finally, I get my flashlight, and the girls are all quiet, and Terry and I are looking at each other because now I'm thinking, I hope this is not a bear. This is not going to go well. So I put the flashlight toward it, and there's like 10 deer that has come within 20 feet of us. Now, when my girls see the deer, they automatically think it's a monster. And they ran screaming, panicking to this mobile home that we're at. And I remember this. As they were running, Terry and I were laughing because I'm just telling him, it's just a deer. That's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. They're running, they're screaming. Neighbors are coming out because it's night. Are you okay? You okay? No, it's just a deer. And then we realized one thing. Our daughter, Kelsey, had to be 6 years old. She was still at the fire pit. So Terry and I were at the fire pit. We're looking right at her. She did not move at all. She didn't have any facial expression, but just hanging on to her little marshmallow and saying, just keep on going. And I'm like, Kelsey, aren't you afraid? Why didn't you scream like the rest of them? And she looked at me and Terry and said this, thy rod and thy staff will comfort me. And I'm like, where did that come from? But you know what? I really believe this. She believed it. She wasn't scared in that instance. Will kids be scared of other things? Absolutely. But her confidence was in that God was her rod and her staff. Isn't that interesting? At 6 years old, and she knew that she believed it, and that power is coming from God. If I were to ask you to describe God, what would you say? And I believe there's many answers that we can come. And there's no wrong answers if you say, well, Jesus is love, he's awesome, and all those answers come into play. But if I were to ask Kelsey at that moment, her actions and her words told me everything of how she describes her God. But what would you say? In Psalm 18, a man named David pens his answer to this very question. And it says this, I love you, Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, and my stronghold. There are three things that should jump out at us reading this passage. The first one is this. It's personal. He uses the word my 9 times in these 2 verses. And he starts the verse with what? I love you. So it's personal. The second thing I want you to see that should jump out at us is this. It's a song David composed and sang for the Lord. The word psalm actually means songs. So when we go to Psalms, they're actually songs put together with music. And David wrote this song for the Lord. There's a third thing I want you to see that should jump out at you is this. It's an expression of what David experienced with God in retrospect, in and through some life experiences. David is celebrating and observing the gracious hand of God. In other words, this, what we're reading is a result of what David experienced with God, and he uniquely adds endearing names for God. They're descriptive expansions of God's character. If you really think about it, the passage is blending his worship with his testimony. Do you see that? This happened to me. So the best way I can explain this is this. It's one thing to get on the roller coaster. See the roller coaster, you get on, you wait in line, the anticipation is there, and you ride it. And I say, I need you to write about what happened, how you felt, what you were thinking. There's a difference if somebody never rode it and they were sitting writing the same thing from afar, looking at the roller coaster but never riding it. What you hear in David is what he experienced. He didn't look at it from afar, he went through it. So when we see and when we hear and we read some of the things that he says in here, he's like, oh, no. I love you, Lord. You're my rock. You're my strength. So it's personal. I want you to look at verse 1. It says, I love you, Lord, my strength. He uses not just any word. He uses Jehovah. I love you, Lord. In other words, I love the Almighty. I love the I am. Not just a roommate, not just somebody I know or some inanimate object. I love Jehovah. He's directing it. But also, this is also where David is spiritually right now. He went through some pretty tough things that we'll get into in a moment. But to David, God is not a lifeless object. He's in love with his God, his creator. The word love here takes on the meaning of heartfelt and deep passion. So he's not saying, I love ice cream. He goes, no. My heart and my passion is toward my God. That's how he starts it. That should grab our attention. And then he adds my strength. When you describe someone as your strength, it indicates a unique and deep bond. You wouldn't go to a stranger and say, you're my strength. You don't know that person. But David experienced it. That would convey only that you love and trust that person. And in verse 2, David begins to share why God is his strength. It says this, the Lord is my rock and my fortress. So he's beginning to tell you, this is what I experienced. David was relating physically what God had also done spiritually. Let me say that again in Spanish. David was relating physically what God had already done spiritually. Are you with me, everybody, still? Because I didn't do Spanish. You're scaring me a little bit. And this is why. David was running and hiding from a king named Saul. And Saul wanted to kill him. In fact, in the same chapter, David calls Saul a violent man. So for him to say, you're my rock, and we'll get to that in a second, but to have a violent person come after you, meaning to kill you, he had some things going on. So what was David doing? He was dwelling among the rocks, among the crags, the clefts they call it, as a place of security. It was a hollowed out place in the rocks you can run for safety. And in some places you can't even get there with horses or anything like that. You have to go by foot, and it was a narrow trail. So it was hard to get to, hard to find. Because ultimately, if you read about David's life, he was hiding in a cave from his oppressor. I want to get away. I don't want to get killed. He had family problems, dysfunction like you would never believe. And then he has a man following him trying to kill him. In verse 31 of the same chapter, David writes this, for who is God besides the Lord? And who is the rock except our God? David not only says, God is my rock, he continues by saying, God is also my fortress. The word fortress means stronghold, and it refers to a wilderness or mountainous place for hiding. And I like this. It's a place of defense and gathering supplies. And this is what made me start thinking. I like this idea of gathering supplies because today, spiritually and physically, it's time to reload. When God gives you a time, when you're with him, you're in his fortress, and God has you right where he wants you to be. And at that time, it's time to reload physically and spiritually. It's time to reload and refresh. Take a breath, refocus, re-strategize. And somebody might raise their hand and say, Andy, I don't even have time to do that. God is somebody you can go to and say, God, I need that time to refresh with you. We need that different kind of perspective. We need to gather supplies, and especially with the Lord. So here's my question for you. When God provides this type of protection, what will you do in that time? What will you say to him? Can I make a couple suggestions? You don't have a choice. I'm going to give them to you anyways. The first one is this. Get on your knees. Get on your knees and ask for his continued strength and his wisdom. Ask for his perspective, not your perspective, his perspective. There was a time that one of my daughters was having a real tough time in elementary school educationally. I mean, she just wasn't getting it. And we're thinking, do we do testing? And the teacher's like, look, she's failing at this. She's not doing well. She's not writing things down. And we finally talked to her. I said, Emily, are you okay? She said, yeah, Dad, I'm okay. And then finally, we saw her watching TV at the house. And we saw how she was squinting. And she was like this, really just trying to look at the TV, trying to get it. And she got closer and closer. I'm like, Emily, can you not see way back by the couch? I mean, it's only like 5 feet away. It's like, I can't see, Dad. We go to the eye doctor, and she probably has every eye doctor we've gone to, the prescription, the doctor looks at the prescription and goes, oh my goodness. She's got terrible eyesight. And one of the things is, when I finally went to LensCrafters, and she finally, and it's like after school, I'm like, Emily, let's go get your glasses. She puts them on in the car. And I've never seen my daughter so excited, because for the first time, she's looking at things with clarity. She goes, Dad, I can see that tree. Dad, I can read that sign. And there was a great perspective all this time. She didn't have the right perspective. That's the same thing I'd be asking God for. When we're in a place where we don't know, God, I don't know how to even look at this. That's when I say, God, give me the perspective, your perspective. Put the glasses on, God's perspective glasses on, and say, oh, okay. I'm getting it a little bit, God. Thank you for that. Are you with me on that, everybody? Here's the second suggestion. Let the truth of God's word saturate your heart. I need his truth, especially today. Third, call those who love you to stand with you. Call those who love you to stand with you, because they're going to stand right by you. And they're going to hold your hand. They might not have the words. They might have the words to say to you. They might have the encouragement. But sometimes the best friends that are there are the ones holding you. I'm right here. We will have days when we need God to provide a cleft in the rock and a mighty fortress, so we are safe and comfortable from people and the arrows of the evil one. Do you agree with that? Let's not make this mistake, that although people aren't trying to kill us right now in this room, that David experienced, people are sure able to hurt us in different ways. Would you agree that some people could be ruthless and so mean sometimes? Maybe we're the ones who are ruthless and mean, and you're going to find out this morning. I want you to remember that no one is immune to people like this. This can happen in the workplace, at school, among friends, among close friends. And unfortunately, you can even have that in the church. We've experienced it. We're not immune to it. It doesn't matter if Mike or Olu we are pastors. It doesn't matter. We're not immune to people hurting us, just like all of you. I share this with her permission. The same one who needed glasses. Her name is Emily. You've seen her sing up here with me sometimes. She would, probably fourth grade, she would come home absolutely crying and wouldn't tell us what's wrong. We'd ask her teacher, it's like, I don't know what's wrong. I can't tell you. I don't know what's happening on the playground. I'll watch for it. And finally, she came out with it. There was this one kid who continued to call her fat and ugly. And I tell you this, everybody, when she had to get those glasses, that's post this one girl calling all those names. When she got those glasses on, all I thought in my head is, I'm sending her back with now glasses where she's going to be made fun of. Can I tell you something? We cried as parents. The best decision we did, the hardest decision we did is send her back. The best decision we did is pray, God, be her rock, be her stronghold. Please remind her that you love her more than anybody because you created her. That's what we try to tell her. Your God created you perfectly. It doesn't matter what you look like. I've done a lot of camps, a lot of youth camps over my years in ministry. And let me tell you something. I've always had kids come up to me and say, Andy, man, people make fun of me. Look how I look. And you know what? It was always in private. And I just kept on telling them, God loves you just the way you are. You know what? Bullying is a word that we came up with this century, in this millennium. Can I tell you something? Being mean has always been there. That's what it is. How can we teach, even as adults, when people say things to us that are so mean and so cruel that you'll never, ever forget it? Can I tell you something? We got to go back to the rock. We got to go back to his fortress. That God, help me in this. Give me clarity. Give me the glasses that I need so I can see how you look at me. My friend, your identity is not in a society. Your identity is not in the church. Your identity is not with the pastor. Your identity is found in Jesus Christ. Period. Are you okay? Everybody okay? Is this too much? We have to remember that God is our refuge and rock. David continues his song by saying this: He is not only my strength, my rock, and my fortress, he is also my deliverer. David experienced God's intervention in the hour of great distress. Don't you love that? The word deliverer depicts one who helps to escape, get out. In other words, I like to say this: God steps in with action. That's his way. It's time. He has his time. He said, well, there we go. I'm right here. But let me give you things to remember in regards to him being your deliverer. First is this: we all have different things we need God to deliver us from. What may be small to you may be big to me. See, God is allowing you to go through things that, I don't know, but I can't look at you and say, well, that's the most petty thing. Why are you having such a problem with that? Well, because it's not for me. It's for that person. And so when we look at God being the deliverer, we are to have different things God is delivering us from. Some people need to be delivered from addiction, a bad relationship, a financial nightmare, a job or business, physical health, depression. My friends, we have a close family member that we found in the last two months that they have a cancer on the liver, and it's this big mass, and they can't get to it to take a biopsy because they'll puncture the lung. My friends, it really just drives us to like, God, why are you letting this happen to us? Why are you letting it happen to someone that we love? We're praying for deliverance. The second thing I want you to remember is this: God's method and timing of delivering you will never match your method and timing. Let me say that again, because it took me, I'm like, oh, I don't like saying this, because it's hard for me. God's method and timing of delivering you will never match your method or timing. Between the post office and this job here, and I'm still working at the post office, I had another job. I worked at Blue Cross. And they trained me, took me 3 months to train. They trained me to be the answer for 5 states to ask any question when you call in, and I would answer it. It was the most stressful job ever. And if anybody's ever been in the health industry and you're trying to get an answer for anything, it's really difficult. And here people are calling in, and I'm like, I had 15 different computer systems that was working. My friends, I am not computer literate that way. I was stressed out. I was getting a rash because I would have this microphone here. My whole face was breaking out, and I never experienced this in my life. And I remember going to Terry and say, Terry, I'm having an anxiety attack. I can't breathe when I'm going in. And part of my pride was this, everybody, is that, hold on, no, I help people with anxiety. I pray for them. God, why is it happening to me? So I'd be praying every day. I come home, and sometimes I'd be in tears leaving because I'm like, this is the most stressful job I've ever had. I wanted deliverance in 24 hours. I made it clear to God, God, I'll give you 24 hours. Could you do that for me? You can almost hear a chuckle in the background. But I want you to know something. It took 9 months. 9 months. And then God moved me out. It wasn't my timing. Trust me. I wanted to give me another job in 2 hours. Let's go. Come on. But God's method and timing were not mine. Can you think about a time when God delivered you? Will you look back and start thinking, like, God, you delivered me out of that? Because putting this message together, I didn't realize the power of his deliverance out of Blue Cross. It was powerful. The second I quit, I walked out, called Terry, and I felt like this huge rock was taken off my shoulders. I'm like, thank you, God. Thank you. I needed to be delivered. Look what David pens next. Everybody still good? Look what David pens next. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge. The phrase, my God is my rock, takes on this idea that all good things are wrapped into one. All of it. Think about every superhero you've ever watched on television or heard about. They have one or two powers, and they still have limitations, and they still have weaknesses. When you think about the God being your rock, he's all-inclusive. He's got wisdom. He's got power. He's infinite. He's limitless. He's unrelenting. He's wise. He never changes. This is someone that you can trust. He's the only true God with no limits and no weaknesses. And because of that, he goes on and says, I take refuge in that. That's the person, the one that was all-inclusive. I'm going to take refuge in that God. The word refuge is relating this idea of seeking out a tree shade. Isn't that cool? Seeking out a tree shade. In other words, that's where I want to run to. I want to hold on to this immovable rock and stay under his shade. We were in Palm Springs with our kids, and we always like to go to the places that are cool in the summer, so we went to Palm Springs. It was 115 out, and we go to that huge place, Soak City, because let's just spend all day there. Let's just go there. But you have to understand something. At 115, every time you wanted to move from one place to the other, you always had to have what on your feet? Sandals. Why? It's 115. You can feel your skin just tear off if it's that hot. Now, we're always running for shade. The first time we got there early, and guess what we look for to pull out our stuff? We look for a place of shade. We don't want to be in that sun where it's just on you. And guess what? I'm losing a little bit of hair here. I can feel it. And then someone steals one of my girls' sandals after we took a ride. I had to carry her back all the way to the car. But it reminds me of who God is. I'm going to protect you. Run to the shade. Run to my shade that I give you. David also says, God is my shield. A shield in those times were used in war. But it wasn't also used for protection. It was also used as a weapon. See, I'm battling. I'm protecting anything coming this way, but now I'm like, hey, I'm going to hit you with it. It was used for both. Can I tell you something? Did you know Satan is always launching arrows at you? Always. In Ephesians 6, verse 16, it says this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. They're just not regular arrows. They're flaming arrows meant for destruction. Satan is strategic. He's calculated. If somebody would ever say to me, oh, Satan is dumb. Well, no, he isn't. He is smart. He's a leader. He's a military leader of a lot of demons. He's determined to move you away from your relationship with the Lord. Now listen very closely. To those who don't believe in Jesus, there's a battle for your soul. There's a battle for your soul, always. For those who do believe in Jesus, there's a battle for your passion. Passion and love for God. That's what he wants, to get you far away from who God is. That's his goal. David points out later in the chapter, in verse 35, he says, you make your saving help my shield, and your right hand sustains me. Your help has made me great. My friends, we need God's shield of faith when our faith is weak. Because is anybody in this room, is your faith ever weak? Mine is. Look how David describes God in verse 2. God is also the horn of my salvation. The horn represents his power and his strength. It's a word associated with victory and defiant power. God is capable to come and save you where you are. My friends, he is victorious. He has the power over life and death. I am confident he is able to help you. If he created the heavens and the earth, I am confident he has the power to save you and deliver you. He has created our sophisticated bodies. He has the power to help you right where you are. And my question is, do you believe it? There were 3 men who were about to be burned alive because they wouldn't worship a figure set up by a powerful ruler. The ruler told all 3 men, hey, if you don't worship what I set up, you will be burned alive. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? All three men replied to the ruler, we don't need to defend ourselves. To you. If we are burned alive, the God we serve is able to deliver us. But if he doesn't, we still won't bow and serve to your God. You see the key here? They knew God was able to save them and still rested in the fact that their God has the final say in their destiny. Let me say that again. You got to get this. They knew God was able to save them and still rested in the fact that their God was the final say of their destiny. Their names? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. True story, found in a book called Daniel. And yes, God did deliver them after they were thrown in. That's the part that I want you to get. After they were thrown in, God saves them. And they walk out unscathed. And the Bible says they didn't even smell like smoke. Only our God can do that. God is the horn of our salvation. He is that power. And he's more than capable to help us in anything we're going through. To David, God was his strength, his rock, his fortress, his deliverer, a rock in whom he takes refuge, his shield, horn of salvation, and lastly, a stronghold. Or maybe, better said, a high tower. In this case, high tower was a fortress either naturally fortified or fortified by men. It was a fortress located on a high ground, beyond the reach of any enemy and any harm. The walls were high and you were able to have a view of your surrounding. And it made me think a little bit. If you're on your high tower and you're standing at the top and you're looking out at the view, and I want you to do this spiritually, think about this spiritually, is that you're looking at a view that God has got you to this place on the high tower. God, I see your grace. I would have never made it here. Where I'm standing right now. I see what you did right here in my life. I see what you did. Oh man, I can't believe I went through that. But without you, I couldn't be here on my high tower, your high tower, because you're my stronghold. Sometimes when we get to that place, we should be people who rejoice and say, God, thank you so much. I'm the worst at that. When I'm thinking, God, you got me through this, and for some reason I should be just jumping up and down. Because you know what? You got me here. God, and I wonder sometimes, how did I get here? It has to be the grace and the fingerprints of our God that got me there. There's great peace knowing God is our stronghold, our high tower, and nothing will penetrate God's stronghold unless he allows it. This is a hard one to chew on. Listen, nothing will penetrate God's stronghold unless he allows it. Let me ask you a question. Is it possible that God is able to take all harm, all enemies, all temptations, all bad things that happen in your life away? True or false? True, because if you said false, he wouldn't be God, right? The question is, so why does God allow some things to pass through a stronghold? Why does he allow that? And here's my theological answer. And if you want, you can write this down, or write it in your, text it in your phone, whatever. And here it is. I don't know. But what I do know is this. God knows exactly what to allow in our lives and what to hold off from our lives. Did you get that? I realize that more and more. Hold on. That God knows exactly, definitively. I know it. I know what he knows to hold from, allow in my life and what to hold off from my life. He will equip you with what we need to move through life's obstacles. And guess what? Even though David's writing the psalm, did he have other obstacles later on? Yes. It doesn't end, but he knows. He's experienced it, remember? Oh, he's my strength. He's my rock. He's my stronghold. He's my shelter. He's my, wow, because he's experienced it. And yes, life is unfair. I mean, it's unfair. But we have the living God, our rock, fortress, deliverer, refuge, his shade, our shield, the horn of salvation, and a stronghold on our side. He stands with us and for us. Ha! He's just not sitting there, standing there. Huh? No, he's for us. Yes! He's that person. Hey! But sometimes we have to remember to tap him in. For some reason, we're like the MMA fighters. Hey, as soon as they're in a bind, what do they do? That means tap out. Guess what? Tap out and say, God, I need you to take over. I can't do it on my own. I always want to do it on my own. But God's like, hey, would you tap out? Let me in? Come on. Because of that truth, David writes another piece of his song in verse 3. Look at it. It says, I called to the Lord who is worthy of my praise. I've been saved from my enemies. Do you see that? What he experienced impact his worship to the Lord. The Lord is worthy of his praise, his adoration, his heart. And my friends, I would say this to you. Let your experience with God impact your worship. How you pray, how you give, how you serve, how you sing. Even if you don't sing, you're letting your heart just sing out quietly. It should change. As I close, let me give you 4 things to think about because every pastor has 4 things. Here it is. How will you describe God when someone asks? What has God led you through? For David, it was all these incredible attributes. How will you describe God? If somebody comes to you like, and just says, hey, so what do you believe? Oh, let me describe him to you. Oh, he's the master. Oh, he loves every part of me, even when I wrong him. And you just keep on adding. How will you describe God? That's number 1. Number 2 is this. Think about. Remember that God equips us from head to toe with who he is. With who he is. How you experience and grow in your relationship with God as your strength, rock, fortress, will only become richer and deeper because you trusted him. I trust you, God. Boy, isn't it hard to give him the reins of your life? Isn't it? Third thing is this. Even when we don't see God in action, this is important. He's still at work. He's still at work. You see, he's still protecting you. You see, God does things that are unseen by us. We have no idea when he puts a stronghold in front of us. Sometimes we need to run to it. Sometimes we'll know it's there. But other times, spiritually, God puts things in place because he knows you need it. Fourth is this. It's time to look back at God's fingerprints and interventions in your life and thank him for being that immovable, caring God. It's time to look back. You're on the stronghold. You're looking out and you're like, God, thank you for getting me through that. With that, what I'm going through now, I know I can do it because you're on my side. You stand with me. I trust you. But God, give me faith minute by minute because, man, I can have such great faith in an hour and I leave this church and I hear something and my faith is gone or weak. That's who we are. But that's when I want to crawl on my knees and go, Lord, help me, so I need you. Let me end with this personally in regards to that, thanking him. There is no way that my marriage with Terry would have lasted without the strength, the rock, the fortress, deliverer, our God whom we take refuge, our shield, our horn of salvation, and our refuge. We couldn't have done it without him. My friends, I wouldn't be standing here today without God doing the things that he did and allowing me to go to him even when I failed him. He's like, Andy, I'm still your rock. I'm still your strength. I never left you. I'm right here, man. Just come in. Come into my shade now. Stop doing it by yourself. I'm thankful. Maybe it's time, even in our worship as we close, that you say, God, thank you for getting me here. Thank you. I look at the view and I see your grace and I see your fingerprints all over that. Whew. And sometimes those fingerprints are more obvious years from when it happened. But it's okay. It's okay. Let's pray together. God, thank you for our time this morning. Oh, what a powerful passage. What a powerful song David writes to us. God, I pray that we would be ready to describe who you are to other people so they could know, so they could fall in love with you, so they would come to a conclusion that I need Jesus. That's all I need. I'm still going to blow it. But Jesus is right here. Guys, some of us need to run for a shade. Some of us need to hide in your cleft. Some of us need your refuge, shelter. So God, continue to tell us how powerful you are, how much you love us, and that you're relentless for us. You love us. God, thank you for this time this morning. Let that encourage us as we walk through these doors. In your name, amen.